Thanks to the Talk Python team who sponsor this episode of the Engineered Mind podcast. If you want to learn Python and delve into exciting topics like data science, web development, or building apps, feel free to visit talkpython.fm/mind to find your next level and get a 10% discount. Also a big thank you to all my patrons who support the Engineered Mind podcast. Hi and welcome to the Engineered Mind podcast. In this podcast, we cover topics such as engineering, artificial intelligence, neuroscience, and other interesting topics to educate, inspire, and engineer people's minds all around the world. I'm your host, Jousef, and for this episode of the podcast, I'm so happy to welcome Adam Kelly to my show. Adam is a software engineer at General Motors in Austin, Texas, working on computer vision and 3D development. Prior to that, he worked on the HoloLens team at Microsoft in Seattle. Adam has a degree in computer science from the University of Michigan. All of his 3D development and deep learning skills come from practical projects and self-directed learning he does in his free time. He is also the creator and co-owner of ImmersiveLimit.com. The Immersive Limit website and YouTube channel are where he shares tutorials, courses, current projects, and thoughts on the AI industry. In this podcast, we also talked about how anything can be learned with enough time, focus, and practice, which he also emphasizes during the podcast. Absolutely worth watching. We also talked about synthetic datasets and training them, using Blender for AI purposes, working with UnityML and courses for the AI community, and much more. For updates on upcoming podcasts, projects, and videos, make sure to follow me on Twitter as well as on Instagram. To join my weekly newsletter, engineeredmind.sh, where I share exclusive content, visit jousef.substack.com. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's my podcast with Adam Kelly. Hey Adam, welcome to my show. It's really a pleasure to have you here.
Hey Jousef, it's really a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So today we want to talk a bit about synthetic datasets, the courses you offer, and also your great YouTube channel where you have amazing content on. But before we jump into the theoretical aspects of synthetic datasets, can you give us like a 1 or 2 minute bio? Who is Adam and what does he actually do?
Sure. Let's see where to start. So I have been a tech person my entire life. I've always loved it. Started out playing video games and then got into electronic music production and then eventually 3D animation. So like I had this dream of working for Pixar and I wanted to go down that path. My parents were both engineers, but they weren't programmers. They had a sense that I would be good at computer science. And so they sort of pushed me in that direction. And I'm really grateful they did. I really didn't have much experience with programming prior to going to college, but I went to University of Michigan and I started doing programming there. Honestly, I was definitely not top of my class. I feel like I was average or maybe a little below average. And I like to just mention that because some people might look at me now after I have, 4 years of college and then 10 years of professional development experience and think, wow, I could never get to that. But, I started not being very good at it too. And I started my career at Microsoft after getting my computer science degree. I feel really fortunate to have had an internship. But aside from that, I didn't really have any direction. I didn't know what I wanted to work on, but I had this sense that I wanted to do something outside of just having a traditional job. And it wasn't until I got into virtual reality that I started actually doing more outside of work. And that was when I started doing some Unity stuff. At the time, I was working on the HoloLens team at Microsoft, which was pure luck, by the way. I did not start at Microsoft on that team. I just got moved to that team internally just through a reorganization. It's a huge company. They needed people to work on this project, and we got brought in. It was completely secret. At the time, I didn't even get to tell my wife what I was working on for a year. I think she was my fiance at the time, but either way, kind of a big deal. And then my sort of interest in side projects grew from there. So that was when I started the Immersive Limit YouTube channel. I should back up. That was when I started the Immersive Limit blog and I started actually publishing some of the stuff that I was doing, talking about my projects and all that. And I thought I was going to be a VR developer for sure. And then from there, I I started looking for something a little different. I was working for Microsoft and I didn't love what I was doing because I was more on the internal tools side of things and doing the data analytics. And that wasn't really what I was so passionate about. I really liked the 3D side of things, kind of going back to my 3D modeling past and what I really like to do. And so I sought out another job and I found this job. Now I'm working for General Motors in Austin, Texas. So I moved from Seattle to Texas. To Austin, and I was originally hired to do HoloLens development, but my team was sort of in a research setting, and so we, as a team, took an AI course on Udacity, and that's where I first started doing AI. So I think that was around 2017 or 2018 that I got introduced to AI. So I'm still pretty new to this. This isn't something I went to school for. And I knew that there was a sense of, or that I knew that you could use 3D rendering to train AI because that was something that they were doing at Microsoft, but I wasn't involved in that. And so I just sort of naturally, as I was learning how to do computer vision type stuff, started taking my hobby 3D modeling stuff and trying to apply that. And so that's how I got into synthetic data. And now at GM, I'm working on a team that is very much focused on creating synthetic data. And on the side, I'm doing all my YouTube stuff. So the YouTube channel started maybe 2 years ago, and we've been growing. We've been doing some synthetic data. We've been doing some UnityML agents, which has been really cool. That's reinforcement learning. And it's just been growing from there. And I've been really excited to do all that. It's been just a lot of fun so far.
Yeah, it's so cool what you're actually doing. I'm really inspired by it. And I appreciate you saying that you were below average because I can relate to that somehow. And it makes it more relatable, right? That we also want to talk about how hard it actually is to put content together, to create a video on YouTube or even a course, which is like a ton of work. That's also something I can relate to. Also, before we jump to the next thing, I want to also mention to the audience, make sure to follow Adam on Twitter and his YouTube channel, because when I saw your YouTube channel the first time was like the thumbnail is on point, the way you make the video is on point, and the way you engage people is on point. So everything is on point somehow, which I really appreciate. And everyone listening to this podcast interested in reinforcement learning, synthetic data, Blender maybe, who want to delve into AI in general, not so much the theoretical aspects, but actually doing the practice, so hands-on, gathering hands-on experience. Make sure to please follow Adam. He's having an awesome YouTube channel, and I wish you grow even faster and more because you're really putting a lot of effort into it.
Well, thank you. I mean, on that point, I just wanted to talk. I kind of have this philosophy with learning of it's based on my own experience. I don't do well when I have to start with the theory and with the math behind things. And so I think that's why I struggled with computer science when I started that, and with AI when I started that. It was too hard up front. I'm a very visual learner, and I learn by doing. And so that's something that I like to bring to the YouTube channel is I like to teach others by doing. And I also like to include some of the mistakes and mess ups that I have, try and show people how to fix an error, things like that. So if you like that style of learning, audience, listeners, that's kind of my brand, is I try and keep it authentic and not pretend that I got it right the first time, that sort of thing. Yeah,
that's what I really appreciate. So props to you, Adam, because you are yourself and you actually show that not everything is like pink and everything works right away, but you actually show people that there's some way you have to do some workarounds, etc.
Yeah.
So I'll definitely put the link of your YouTube channel and everything else. Also your courses, which we'll talk about in a few moments, in the description. When it comes to synthetic datasets, why do we even need synthetic datasets? Why is it so important for us?
So I found out pretty quickly, as soon as I started doing any sort of computer vision AI, that coming up with a unique data set for your problem is really difficult. So a lot of times when you take a course, you get started, they give you the data set. And getting the data set from someone else makes it really easy, but the actual data prep and the data creation is really hard. If you try to teach an AI to spot some unique thing, let's say you have, well, I'll just give an example of what I did. So when I first tried to make my own project, I wanted to make a cigarette butt detector. And just detecting litter on the ground. I didn't have the robotics skills to make anything that could actually do the picking up, but I thought if I could just build a detector, maybe that would be helpful to someone else. Mm-hmm. And creating the data set for that meant I would have to take thousands of pictures of trash on the ground and manually trace the outline of each of those shapes to create a data set, because you have to train AI with thousands of examples to detect exactly which pixels belong to that object that you're trying to detect. So that was kind of what got me started with it. But I've learned sort of along the way that there are other cases where synthetic data is useful. And so let me just sort of describe what I mean by synthetic data first, and then I'll give a couple examples. Mm-hmm. So typically, training computer vision AI, you have a picture, and then you have some sort of object that you're trying to detect, and you either have a bounding box over it, or you shade in the pixels that belong to that thing. If you make a 3D rendering of that same object that looks very similar to the real world thing, then your computer already knows which pixels belong to that object because it rendered them. So you just have to write the code that then, or tell your rendering engine to isolate those pixels and output those in addition to your data set. So you get the masks for free, so to speak. Once you've created that system that does that, you just have to bring your own 3D models, and you can even add your own background pictures or videos to it as well, and sort of superimpose that over top, and sort of think of it like green screening or any sort of Hollywood effects. You can add your own stuff to that. So that's what synthetic data is. And then to go into sort of why it's useful, there are some cases where it's not really possible, or it's extremely expensive to get real world data sets. So an example from my job, my 9-to-5 job at GM, we manufacture automobiles. And so there's a lot of metal that needs to be stamped into parts that then are composed and make your car. And most of the time they get it right, and the stamping works great. Sometimes metal tears, sometimes holes aren't punched properly, things like that. The problem is it's so rare that those problems come up that we just don't have enough examples of bad parts that we can actually train an AI. So the idea there is, if you don't even have those parts to train on, well, what if we could 3D render those parts and introduce our own defects and sort of simulate that process and create a huge data set of fake broken stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's one example. Sort of along that line, imagine you're manufacturing a product that's never been made before. You don't even have a single picture of the real thing, but you might have 3D renderings of it. You might have the 3D model of it. So you could create a data set based on that. Another example is one that I actually tested out. Sometimes it's just not practical to get a huge data set of things in weird situations. So I had this thought that I bet that even an AI that's trained and is really good at recognizing cars might not be good at recognizing cars that are flipped upside down from a car accident. Mm. And so I actually tested this with I think it was just one of TensorFlow's popular trained models. So it was pre-trained, and it detects cars and people and all sorts of stuff. And I found a few pictures of car accidents with flipped over cars, and it thought they were motorcycles most of the time because it had never seen these cars flipped upside down. And so that's another place where I think that training with synthetic data, you can render the car from any different angle you want and have just as many sort of flipped upside down as you have right side up, and that the AI can be just as good at detecting them in either case. So there's other cases where it might be too dangerous to collect real images. Like maybe if you're training an AI to save an airplane from crashing. So you want to train on images of what it looks like when an airplane is about to crash, but you can't just crash a bunch of airplanes to collect those images. That's just not realistic. Mm-hmm. So there's that. And then there's also, I know there's some things where you can remove racial bias from these algorithms by including lots of different skin tones. Like I've seen hand data sets where they 3D model a hand, and then they can put it in lots of different positions, 3D render them, but then they can render it with different skin tones and in different lighting conditions and with different camera constraints and all that sort of thing. So I think that's a pretty decent idea of some examples of why you would want to use synthetic data.
Yeah, you give an incredible overview of what's actually possible and why we should use them. We also have listeners from the engineering, with an engineering background or from the engineering field, apart from the AI audience. Would it also be possible to do this in Blender? Let's say I would create models from a gear or anything other engineering parts, for example, and I could train a data set for engineering parts. That would be possible, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some companies that I've spoken to some leaders at different startups that are focusing on this exact problem, I would say, where a company can provide them with a 3D model of what they're trying to recognize, and then they can help to create that data set for you, because they have the tools to just sort of import whatever model you have and put it into whatever context you might have, and then create that data set for you. So you wouldn't even need to necessarily have the Blender expertise, or using Maya or Unity, or there's lots of different 3D rendering software that you could use for this task. I personally use Blender because it's free and it's really powerful for being free, and it's very accessible to people. So it's good for teaching, making it more accessible to others. But yeah, there's lots of opportunity for that sort of thing.
Yeah, that would have been my next question. Why Blender? Because, well, it's open source, right? Because you use it in one of the courses where you train ABC dataset.
Yeah.
Inside Blender. Can you explain what was the motivation behind this? Was it exactly because you mentioned the synthetic aspects?
Yeah. So when I was trying to figure out how to do this, how to create synthetic data, how to create masks of these objects in a rendered image, I started with Blender because Blender, it has the end-to-end process for creating a data set. It can do the 3D modeling as well as render them out, as well as give you the masks that you need and any other information you need. You could output positions or a depth map or whatever else, anything that you can get information-wise from a 3D scene, you could output in some way or another. And so I went with Blender just because I had that experience, but I also noticed there really wasn't any good educational resources out there when I was searching for it. And so I thought this would be a good opportunity to create a course that could introduce people who may have never touched Blender before, kind of just wanted to target the person who maybe just finished a machine learning course and wanted to take it a little further and was interested in the 3D side of things. So it doesn't assume that you have Blender experience. It assumes you have at least some Python experience, because it's kind of hard to dive into programming if you've never done it before. Or if you're an experienced programmer but you've never used Python, it's not too hard. But that's kind of the audience that I was targeting with this particular course. And I know you said you had just started the course. So I start out by teaching with a simple shape that you don't even need to know how to 3D model at all for. It's just the idea of how to create a synthetic data set, period. And so we render out a 3D A, a 3D B, and a 3D C, and we create a classifier that is able to detect them despite being, an A shape that's been rotated at a weird angle. It gets really good results. And then in the course, we move on to detecting an actual teacup that I created a model of in Blender, because it's fairly easy to model, provide that, and then we create a classifier that can detect how full a tea cup is with tea. So that's coming in the course that you're working on now. So
yeah, it's incredibly amazing how the quality, it's really top-notch quality. So if anybody's interested, I will also put a link of that, of course, down in the description. You also worked on other courses, as I have seen. For example, there's one famous one, because when I was Googling at some day, was some time ago, about reinforcement learning, Unity, and then there was this Colibri tutorial from Unity. That's what you were also working on, right?
So you're talking about the UnityML agents?
Exactly, yes.
Reinforcement learning?
Yes.
Yeah, so that kind of put my YouTube channel on the map, I feel like. I started creating ML Agents content, and I was one of the only people that was creating it because it was such an early project. And as an early project, it updates very frequently. They update it every month. And so it's really hard to keep up with. And maybe I'm just willing to go through that pain of it being updated and no one else is. But so I started out and I made a couple interesting projects. I made this little pig that could sniff out truffles, and it used sort of stereo smell. So each nostril could get a different strength. And so it learned to pick up truffles that way. And then I did this penguin tutorial. I feel like the penguin tutorial is kind of, everyone has seen that. Anyone who's ever done ML Agents seems to have seen that tutorial. And I feel bad because we've got some really old videos from super old versions of ML Agents that don't really work anymore, but it's a gateway for people to find our newer content. So I can't take it down, but that's kind of how YouTube is. You can't really update content. You just have to hope that people see that and are like, oh, I wonder if there's an update. But then, after that was a success. I can't remember the exact order of things. Made this airplane course, and I think it's so cool. It's these little airplanes that can fly around, and it's a race course. So there's these checkpoints that they have to fly through. It kind of reminds me of the game Diddy Kong Racing, where it was an N64 game where you could fly through these little like rings when you were playing in an airplane. And that was kind of one of the inspirations for it. And so you teach these airplanes how to fly through a course. It's not using computer vision. It's using raycasts, actually. So like you have a plane and it kind of shoots out rays in different directions as it's flying. And then as it hits things in the level, then it's able to fly through. And if you train it all the way, you won't be able to beat it. So I made it so that you can fly against these airplanes, but I can't beat them when they're fully trained. They're too good. They'd never mess up. And maybe they've memorized the level. That's probably part of it. But even still, it's pretty cool to play.
Yeah, scary but satisfying. What I would be interested in is how big was your background in reinforcement learning? How much theory do you need in order to build such a thing? For example, like the plane or a penguin or even a pig.
So I would say you need to know pretty much none of the math behind it. Actually, I feel like ML Agents is one of the friendliest introductions to AI that you can get, with the exception that you kind of need to wrap your head around game development a bit. So if you have any Unity development experience, it should be really easy to start with an example with reinforcement learning without learning the actual AI foundations. The problem is it's, even for someone who has those foundations, it's a lot of trial and error. So you have to really do a lot of work to figure out how to craft a reward system that incentivizes these, what they call agents, which is your little character in your game, to do the thing you want it to do. And this is a problem with any reinforcement learning. So it's not unique to Unity, and it's not solved by Unity either. But if you think of it this way, let's say you're playing a video game, you might have a task to pick up lots of coins and then eventually get to the end of the level. Think of that as kind of the way that reinforcement learning works. You get a little reward for doing certain things along the way and then a big reward at the end. And so you have to figure out, usually you're not trying to use coins. In the case of my airplanes, I was trying to use checkpoints that they could fly through to sort of give them rewards along the way and eventually teach them what they needed to do. But in the meantime, they're making sort of random decisions and seeing if that works. And then you can train many at the same time and they can all sort of learn from each other. But it's that is the challenge. The challenge is patience. The challenge is sort of wrapping your head around what sort of rewards might work well for solving a problem. It can be a lot of fun. It can be a lot really satisfying. It can also be extremely frustrating. I'll be on my 100th iteration of a project and running it, and I'll run it, and then I'll come back in 2 hours, and then it failed, and then I'll try. Oh, okay, well maybe I'll give it more reward for when it does this thing, and then I'll have to come back in 2 hours and check, and so that can be kind of tiring. But ultimately, I would say it's quite accessible to get started with.
Got it. So if there's any errors, so you wouldn't say the fundamentals of reinforcement have to be understood from the applicant or using UnityML, but it's more like trial and error and figuring out how to fix things here and there, like little knobs that you turn, basically.
Yeah, I would say it's kind of like you get to spend your time thinking about what observations the neural network gets, and then also how you reward it for doing things, instead of thinking about how to set up an entire training algorithm and all that, because they do that for you. They actually just switched from TensorFlow to PyTorch, and they've spent a lot of time building up that foundation. So if you want to, you can bring your own neural network, but they've provided this foundation. The Unity team is great. I've talked to them quite a bit because they contracted us to do the Hummingbird course that's on Unity Learn. So that's a free ML Agents course that you can take that's on their free Unity Learn program, that they worked with us to basically just make sure that it was up to their standards, and that it was the quality that they wanted for their platform. And then I just created all that. So it was cool to work with them in that process, and they're really nice and friendly, and they appreciate that I'm sort of helping them spread the word and teach how to use their product. So that's been a cool relationship.
Yeah, this is awesome. Also, I just noticed I said the German word for hummingbird earlier on. That's why you probably were a bit confused. I was like, yeah, it was hummingbird.
Yeah, I didn't catch that one. I just kind of guessed it where you were going with that.
Yeah, exactly. And then now I noticed, hummingbird. Okay, this was the tutorial. I was saying the German word. Anyway, are there any other frameworks like UnityML where you could do the same thing, but you're kind of stuck with UnityML because it's way more accessible than all the other solutions?
Oh, yeah. I don't know, because I haven't spent a lot of time experimenting outside of Unity. I've seen some really impressive things with like the StarCraft AI, and I know, I think it was DeepMind had done someone did capture the flag. I can't remember if it was OpenAI or DeepMind, and I thought that was so cool. But I haven't experimented with any other 3D reinforcement learning type stuff, no.
Yeah. So if someone wants to follow your path and delve into reinforcement learning / using UnityML, what would you recommend them to do apart from taking also the great courses that you have and visiting your YouTube channel, of course, which we already covered? And what would you recommend them to do? Which resources would you recommend in general?
So I would probably recommend trying out a few pre-built examples. If you want to do Unity ML agents, then they've got a lot of examples that you can look at. But I'll also mention their examples aren't perfect either. So that's a great opportunity for you to go in and say, oh, I see they did it this way. I wonder if I did it this way, if it would work better. And I've had some cases where it actually does work better because none of us, even the experts in this field, have this fully figured out. And there's not necessarily a perfect answer anyway. So that's kind of a cool opportunity just to tweak things and experiment. And I would suggest working with an example that is fully working first, and make sure that you get that working, and then try an experiment, and also not take on anything too crazy. I say this a lot on my YouTube channel. If you have a deadline and you're going to get an AI to work before that deadline, be very cautious. Make sure you set very small milestone goals along the way, because sometimes you think that you're going to end up getting something to work, and it just doesn't work the way you expected. So creating that Hummingbirds course was actually extremely stressful because I had a deadline and I wasn't sure I was going to get that thing to work. That was a very stressful time, I will say. But then other resources, I've recommended the fast.ai course several times for learning some of the foundations, getting a grasp on how AI works. That's a free course. The Udacity course that I took, the Udacity Deep Learning Nano degree, it was great. It is really expensive, so that it may be out of reach for a lot of people, but it was good when I took it a couple of years ago. So I imagine it still is really high quality.
Yeah, I took it as well. It's very high quality, I have to say.
Yeah. And then I don't know. I learn best by just doing, and I've found that by experimenting and just being really persistent, really stubborn when you can't get a problem to work, like not just giving up, that's one of the things that I think will differentiate people who this is sort of it. I think it's true of computer science and programming and AI and all the whole field is like, you'll be good at this if you're the type of person who's willing to stick with something until you figure it out, even if no one knows the answer. Even if you've been searching for 2 days and you can't figure out how to do something, on Stack Overflow or searching whatever, searching Google for the answer. If you're going to stay persistent, then I think you can get there and, push through, because it's so rewarding when you do get it. But if you're not that type of person, you probably know that about yourself, and it's going to be really difficult to make progress in a field like this, especially where there's no perfect answer and even the experts haven't figured it out yet. So we're all learning at the same time.
Yeah. Do you also think that there's like an abundance of material out there, but what's really scarce is actually the motivation and actually sticking to something without like moving to another thing?
Yeah, that's definitely hard. If you have a problem you want to solve, then sometimes you can get that first, like it almost feels like you're 75% of the way there, and you get this AI working and you're like, wow, I can detect this thing and it's really accurate. But if you actually try to solve a full problem end to end, there's so much more that goes into it. So you really need to be motivated to get it working end to end. Now, I don't think that UnityML agents is necessarily like that, but I'm thinking more like a computer vision problem where you need to not only make it work pretty well at detecting the thing that you're trying to detect, but then you need to do something about it once you've detected it. So if you're talking about maybe a robot that's going to pick up garbage that has been thrown on the side of the road, not only do you need to detect some types of garbage, you need to detect all types of garbage and not ignore, or that you need to ignore certain things like leaves and plants and, ignore markings on the sidewalk. And you need to make sure that you have a robot that won't get stuck and that can actually do all this. So then you need to think about like different versions of it and how you manage your data sets. And there's just so much to it. And I think it's going to for sure require a team of people to build a full end-to-end product. So that's just something to be aware of as you get into this, that you can't do it all yourself. I'm certainly learning that. But also that just like celebrating small wins along the way as you get things working is really important. And that kind of helps you keep your motivation up when otherwise it can be really frustrating and exhausting. And you can beat yourself up when you feel like you should be able to figure this out because Amazon figured something out similar, right? But the reality is they've got lots of experts, lots of money, lots of time, and they only show their wins. So, don't compare yourself to the titans in the field that have a really unfair advantage, and just, and be realistic with yourself and celebrate those small wins.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Adam. We can also say there are parallels between us humans and the agents in UnityML. So if you imagine you are an agent, Adam, in the environment, the world, or Earth in general, what is most rewarding for you in your day-to-day life?
Wow. I really like helping people, it turns out, which is, I didn't know this about myself. Well, I kind of had a sense, but until I started this YouTube channel and sharing more of my projects, I don't think I realized how much I liked doing it. People ask me a question. I really like solving problems. I really like solving puzzles. And it's gotten to the point where the audience is getting to the size where it's almost like I can't help people as much as I want to, but I'm still able to help people who are taking our courses and things like that, of course. And so, that plus getting feedback from people that says like, this is so helpful. I've watched a ton of other videos. This one finally taught me what I needed to know. Thank you so much. I get people who go way over the top and say, you're my hero, or I love you, you're the best, things like that. And that maybe goes to my head a little bit. I used to get that just from my family and close friends when they would have their technology problems, and they'd come to me because, I'm I'm the computer guy, so I know how to solve any technical problem that ever existed on the planet in my family's eyes, of course. But getting that feedback from them was always nice. But now to get it from more people externally, it's really validating, and I like doing that quite a bit.
Yeah, I can relate to that as well. What would you say? What is the most fascinating concept for you in AI? Like when you first heard about it, this was like mind-boggling for you.
I mean, the fact that AI can sometimes be better than humans at things like diagnosing a disease or skin condition or something like that, where the AI can become a tool that doctors can use to, make their jobs easier and make the world a better place. I think that's kind of mind-boggling in a positive way, but also I'm blown away by the scary ways that AI could destroy us. And I don't like to spend a lot of time dwelling on the negative side of things, but I'm not afraid of artificial general intelligence, honestly, because I don't think that we're anywhere near it. I probably don't have the education required to say that with any confidence, but that's just how I feel. Maybe I'm just being optimistic there. But more like how good we are at making tools for hurting other people, for whether it's hacking and stealing people's financial information, or whether it's a weapon that's actually going out and physically killing people, hurting people, or even just online trolling and harassing people online. I think there's so many bad things that people can do with AI. And I just hope that, everyone who watches my videos gets sort of and this interview kind of gets a sense that you should do good things. You should try to make tools with AI that are going to do good things and help the world, and know that you have to take that into consideration. Someone could pick up your tool and use it to do bad things. And just, if you are providing a tool or education or something like that, just try to be mindful of that and encourage positivity and being good, not just, I know that I could create a synthetic data set that could be used in a weapon, but I would never do it. And I don't want to partner with anyone who might do that either. I just don't feel right about doing it. And so, that's kind of mind blowing when you start going down that dark path of thinking how this stuff could be used in a bad way. And I just hope that it doesn't go that way. I kind of think of it like I could teach someone math and they might use that math to do bad things. But hopefully they'll use it to do good things. So I guess that's kind of both sides. So hopefully more of the good things will keep blowing my mind in the future, not the bad stuff that everyone's afraid of.
I appreciate it, Adam. It's very inspiring. And I have to say it again. So you being like a very positive guy in the way you explain things and how you approach people in your videos and touch people in your videos is really inspiring, I have to say. So I have not lost any faith in humanity, of course, with you being one of the reasons. So I really appreciate that, Adam.
Well, thanks.
Let's say you could talk to your 18-year-old self. What would you tell him? Or young Adam, what would you tell young Adam?
Man, I've thought about this a lot. And sometimes I think that I might not listen to myself, my older self, but just in a lot of ways that you don't have to feel like you have to have everything figured out right now. Mm-hmm. I definitely felt inferior to other people, especially other developers. I had friends who were much better developers, much better test takers. College was pretty hard for me. I worked really hard, and I'll admit now that my GPA is boosted up by taking a few easy classes. Like I took a botany class where half the time I was spent in a greenhouse. That helped push my GPA a little bit. so that you can do that sort of thing if it helps, and don't worry too much about it, because you can learn things throughout your career. I don't think it's ever too late to learn a new thing. And so just because you're not the best in your class, don't worry about it. So that's on the academic side of things. The other thing is not to give up on your interests. If there's something that's really interesting to you, like I was really interested in 3D modeling, and then I went into a career that didn't have any of that. It didn't have any 3D animation, 3D modeling, any 3D at all, really, until I just by chance got put onto this HoloLens team and got more exposed to it again. But don't give up on that stuff, because that's probably what you're most interested in and what's going to bring you success in the future. Because if you're passionate about something and you can find a way to make that part of your career, then that is just so much more rewarding. I don't think it's realistic at every stage of life that you're going to be able to follow your passion. Sometimes you just, you have reality to deal with, but you never know what might come in the future if you keep up those skills and keep those doors open to possibilities in the future. Mm-hmm. So that, and just be careful what you put on the internet, because the internet doesn't forget what you do when you're young. I feel very lucky that I didn't grow up where I was so young that I was putting my stupidest moments online. I feel bad for kids who grow up now who are able to share everything online, even the mean things that I said to other people that I regret, when I was younger. Just that, if that was still out there, if that was still on the internet, I would feel so bad that that was still out there. And I guess that also leads me to just be kind to people and learn empathy if you can. That was something I didn't really learn until I met my wife. She is the most empathetic person that I know. And I'll give her a plug. She does all the video editing, and she does a lot of the behind the scenes administrative work for Immersive Limit. So she's an awesome business partner too. But she has taught me so much empathy and how to care for other people and how to put myself in other people's shoes. And when you can do that, it is so good for your career. It's so good for your happiness. It's so good for your relationships with other people. People want to be around you when you can understand how they're feeling. Yeah. And so never lose sight or underestimate how powerful that empathy can be for yourself and for the people around you and for helping other people.
Yeah, it's so cool that you said it, Adam. Thank you so much. If there, hypothetically, we are both not experts, obviously, but if there hypothetically was an AGI, what would be the first question you would ask an AGI system?
Okay, so artificial general intelligence, meaning like an AI that's as smart as a person, right?
Maybe even smarter than a person.
Or more smart than I've heard. Yeah, right. The doomsday scenario that exactly. We're all afraid of, where there's an AI that's smarter than all of us combined. Yeah. The first question I would ask, I don't know. I don't, there's some questions that I could think of, like, what should I do next, sort of thing, like guide me toward success, toward financial wealth, whatever, all these things. But I don't like the idea of giving anything else agency over my path forward. So I wouldn't want to be influenced in a way. I feel like watching Westworld, I don't know who's watching that has seen Westworld, but there's basically this AI that's in one of the seasons who's controlling everybody's, they don't realize they're being controlled, but they're being manipulated and controlled to follow a certain life path that the AI wants. And I feel like if I asked it that question, it might influence me to do something. So I guess I would focus more on how to make a more fair system for everyone. There's a lot of attention being drawn, definitely in the United States right now, to income inequality and racial inequality and, you name it, any sort of inequality and unfairness. And I just want to know how we can improve those systems to give everyone a fair shot. So that's my on-the-spot answer. I think that's a pretty good one. I feel proud of that one.
It's a pretty good one, definitely. And before we wrap things up, Adam, I also want to talk about the things that people don't see. So all of the hard work that goes into your channel, your course, etc. You talked about it a little bit, but can you emphasize a bit what it takes to create a video, how much hours it takes, and preparing, maybe writing a script and so on? Maybe you can
Sure.
give a little bit of insight.
Yeah. So most of the work is done prior to the video. It's figuring out something to teach. So I'm always kind of doing some sort of project, but I have to figure out if this is something I can teach to other people. Because sometimes I do something and there's so many like dependencies. And by that, I mean, you need to install CUDA on your graphics card and you need to have this kind of computer to do it. And you need to have like all these different things need to work together in order for it to work. That doesn't make for a good tutorial because it's not accessible to a lot of people. So just coming up with something that works and then figuring out what people will actually like and figuring out how to make it look cool. Because sometimes something works really well and it looks great, or it works great. It is interesting, but it maybe wouldn't have a very interesting thumbnail or something on YouTube that people are actually going to click on. Mm-hmm. So there's all these weird considerations when you're trying to teach this stuff. If you want to focus on growth, that if you make them right, if you make the right decisions, then it'll be a really successful video. And if you make the wrong decisions, then it'll just, some people will find it and they'll really appreciate it, but people might not click on it. So it's weird that way. And I try not to make any clickbait stuff too. So I refuse to be inauthentic that way. But in terms of a video, once I know how to do a thing, it's not too hard for me to make the video because I'll often just record it in 1 or 2 takes, record my screen, do stuff like that. And then Kayla, my wife, does a ton of post-processing. So she removes all of my ums and all of my mouth noises and things like that that are really annoying to listen to. And it helps me edit things and it helps me with the flow of things too. So that's the kind of stuff that goes a little bit into the YouTube channel and a lot into the courses that we create. So the YouTube channel is usually a little more informal. It takes less time. Usually takes me like an hour to make a YouTube tutorial on something that I've already sort of learned. And then it takes me quite a bit longer to make a course. With every video course that I've made, I've recorded each video at least 3 times, I feel like, because sometimes I'll record each one and then realize, I should have taught this first. And now everything that I just recorded doesn't make sense in that order anymore. Or, oh shoot, I was using a version, they just updated the version on this software and something's different now or whatever. So usually by the 3rd time I sound pretty polished and I know what I'm doing at that point, but it's also like, okay, so this course, if I had recorded it perfectly the first time through, would have only taken me 10 hours to make because it's only like a 4-hour course or something. But in reality, it took me 40 hours to make this course. So, and I don't actually know. I'm sure it took more than 40 hours, especially if you add in the time that Kayla spent editing it and the time that we spent marketing it and all that stuff. There's a lot that goes into it to make this stuff, but ultimately it's been pretty rewarding along the way.
You also recently created the Patreon account, right? To make people actually being able to support you. And I think you don't even have ads in your videos, right?
Yeah. So that's monetizing. This has been interesting because on one hand, I have a full-time job that pays my bills and I don't need the money. On the other hand, putting this much work into something and getting compensated nothing kind of feels a little unfair and is devaluing myself, something that Kayla's been working on getting me not to do. Because I'm like, okay, let's make this course $10. And she's like, are you kidding? This is the only course out here on this topic. And you're creating super high quality stuff. Yeah. That's not fair, especially when you want to help everyone who has questions. Like, you have to charge something for this. So yeah, we've been doing that. We started the Patreon because one of our YouTube followers actually said, hey, I know you have courses, but I'd really like to support the YouTube channel. I think what you're doing here is really great. And so we have 4 patrons and we're really grateful for them. And so we're not providing any special stuff right now, but in the future we might provide like special projects and stuff like that to the patrons. And yes, we tried to turn off all ads on our YouTube channel because we were getting like $30 a month. And I just felt like that wasn't really worth the trouble for all of the subscribers and, you know, some of the patrons and whatever. I have no idea. My concern, I think I read something recently that YouTube was going to start adding ads to videos even if they weren't monetized. And so who knows, YouTube might just start adding ads to our videos anyway. And at that point, I guess we might as well get paid for them, but we'll try our best to not bombard people with ads or spam or anything like that, because it's really nice to allow people that can afford to pay for the content to sort of subsidize those who can't. Mm-hmm. And then we can offer free stuff to people who can benefit a lot, but can't necessarily afford to help us at this point. Because I've been there. You know, I didn't always have a tech industry salary, and I get it. I couldn't always afford the software that I was using, but I had this philosophy when I was younger and I was using like a cracked version of some software. It's like, when I can afford this, I will pay for it, because I know that there's real developers with families that are working to build this stuff so that, you know, they can feed their families. Yep. I don't know that I thought that deeply when I was, 16 years old, but, I had a sense that someday I knew that I would pay for this stuff. And that's what I try to do now, is I try to pay for things. And I assume that if I put enough out there and I put positivity into the things I do, that people will want to compensate us for that. And then hopefully one day we'll be able to do this full time. And I'm sure you can relate to that, wanting to do this full time, and that, if people keep supporting us, then we can get there one day. So that's kind of where we're at with that.
Yeah, this is great. What would you say, Adam? What was the hardest thing you have ever done?
Oh, man. Related to this business with Immersive Limit, probably just starting, putting myself out there. That first YouTube video was hard to do, because it is, there's a very strong push inside of many of us as humans to not embarrass ourselves and to not do anything that might shame us in the future, and to push past that is so hard to do. And so, that certainly, related to this, was hard. Otherwise, I mean, college was really hard for me. Actually, let me take this opportunity to tell a tiny story. So sure. I was in one of the classes that is considered a weeder class, in that it weeds out students who are not really good enough to get in through this program. And it was a computer science core class. It was EECS 280, I think, Electrical Engineering and Computer Science 280 at University of Michigan. And I mistook the date of the final project due date. And I thought I had 2 days left, and I did my first submission to the auto grader, and it told me that my submission had been submitted after the due date. And it turned out that I had submitted 2 days after it was due, or something like that. And I thought I was 2 days ahead. I had mistaken the date. And so the policy for that class was, you get a letter grade off for every hour that the project is late. So at that point, 2 days after, I had already failed the project. And that meant that I was probably going to fail the class, unless I did really well on the final exam, which I had been putting off studying for until the last minute. And so that moment was probably the low point of my college career. And I thought I had completely ruined my career prospects at that point, because I was failing out of a class that was like core to the computer science curriculum. And I was really struggling in that class. And I just feel it was really hard to just pick myself up and say, okay, no, I'm going to keep trying. I don't want to just give up. I went to the professor and I explained the situation, and he was like, well, the policy is what it is, but we'll take your situation into consideration. Just start studying for the final. I don't think I did terribly good on the final either. but the professor had some mercy and I ended up passing the class. I think I got like a C+ in this core curriculum class, but I passed. So I was able to keep going in my computer science career. And I actually reached out to that professor maybe a year or two ago and thanked him and told him where I was at in my career and said, you might wonder sometimes whether you should give someone a chance when they mess up like this. But I just want to tell you, I've worked at Microsoft, I'm working at General Motors, I'm doing really good in my career. And so I think that's a cool story to share because picking yourself up after a failure can be really hard. But also on the other side of the coin, giving someone a second chance can also make a huge difference and give them the chance that they need to succeed. So,
yeah. This is a great story, Adam. Is there anything else you would like to tell the audience before we wrap things up? Any other life stories or philosophies?
Life stories, philosophies. I don't have anything too wise that I've prepared at this point, but I will just say if you're interested in this sort of thing, if synthetic data is interesting, computer vision, reinforcement learning, definitely check out our website and our YouTube channel and our courses. We're so appreciative of everyone who's been part of our journey so far. Both Kayla and I are just so excited about how much we're growing. And also, we just started a community forum for Immersive Limit. I looked around and I didn't see a lot of places where people were having discussions about AI and certainly not sort of the intersection between 3D modeling and game development and AI together. And so a while back, I started a Facebook group for that, but that hasn't really gone anywhere. And I don't love Facebook anyway. Yeah, so I wanted to, I figured, why not try and create a community that is around this? So it's a forum that we are paying for hosting. So there's no ads. There's no, I'm not going to accidentally get banned for saying something against Facebook or something on the platform or whatever. So it should be a community where we have complete control over where it goes and what it is. And Kayla and I are really serious about inclusion. So we want it to be an inclusive community for everyone, exclusive to people who don't want to be nice to others or be inclusive. And, I think that there's a lack of diversity in this technology field that we want to try and get past. So, so join us on the forum if you're interested in trying that out. It's going to be free to join. And, I think that pretty much covers it. I guess we did talk about doing a discount for the course. And so we are going to provide a discount coupon for the 3D rendered datasets in Blender course. So anyone who's interested in that can check that out. We'll put a link to that in the description, I'm sure. Yeah. And we're going to run that. I think we made it active through the end of March. So you should have plenty of time after seeing this. We can extend that date too if you feel like we need to, based on when you post this video. So we'll just make sure that there's like 3 months worth of time after the video.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking maybe if people see the podcast in like 2 years or so, we have to think about a solution.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of that. Well, whatever. Reach out to us and say that you saw us on the podcast.
Yeah, we'll exactly.
See if we need to reactivate the link or something.
Yeah. Also good that you mentioned it. I did not notice that you created a community, which I'm definitely going to join after this podcast for sure.
Cool. Yeah, it's brand new. I set it up in like November of 2020 and then didn't know quite how to start it. And so now that it's January 2021, during this recording, we finally just started it up. So we have a few early people joining. And so it's really exciting to just see some people that are interested in this topic starting to talk. And I think it'll be a good way for people to meet each other because it can be hard to do so in YouTube comments. I don't think that's a very good way to meet people. So we're trying to provide a better way for our community to engage with each other.
Absolutely. And I think everybody who can support you and enjoys your content should actually do it because you're really doing a great job, Adam. I have to repeat myself here to really put some emphasis on that. I can't even believe we have already 1 hour of our podcast recorded. I hope there will be a second part, hopefully in the future. For example, if you do another course or work on anything else, But I would also love if the audience likes it and listening to this podcast, maybe do a review of your flight simulator course. That would probably be awesome. Show people what they can achieve with the flight simulator course. And if they want to maybe to decide to buy the course, I'll put a link to that then under
Sounds
my review.
Great. Yeah.
With that being said,
thank you
Adam,
so much.
Sure, anytime. And because I think, because we are small creators, we have to support each other in some way. Because what I see oftentimes is that people or YouTubers with 100,000 subscribers or 1 million subscribers kind of are in a clique or in a group with all the other great or big YouTubers. And I think the small ones have to support the other small ones. So.
Yeah, that works for me. I think you're the second other small YouTuber that I've met, so it's exciting to start meeting some of the other YouTubers. This isn't a community that I know too much about. I just know that there's definitely some heavyweights that are getting lots of attention on YouTube. So it's cool. It's cool to talk to you.
Yeah. Again, I really much appreciate it. We talked about a lot of things, Adam, and I hope the audience will be inspired to maybe even take also your path and not be too demotivated because they're having a low GPA like we have or like we did in college. So I really much appreciate it, Adam, and I wish you all the best for the future.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much.